Hello everyone, my name is Carson. Today we're going to be exploring natural geographic processes at the Cibolo Conservation Center in Boerne, Texas. Join me on this journey as we explore geography in my backyard. Some of the things specifically that we'll be looking for today is going to be weathering, specifically on rocks, right? Now there are three main types of weathering. We'll try and find some examples of all three types today. First one's going to be physical or mechanical weathering, right? Second is going to be biological or biotic weathering. And the third example of weathering that I'm going to be looking for right now is going to be chemical weathering. All three of these types of weathering have distinct characteristics that you can tell what is happening based on how the rock looks, what the nearby detritus is composed of, and other similar things. If we look over here at these rocks, we'll be able to see some very clear examples of chemical weathering. So come down here with me. Take a look at these marble-sized holes in this rock right here. This is going to be a clear example of chemical weathering. Now in this case, this is limestone. Limestone is very common in the Texas Hill Country, kind of San Antonio region, which is where we're at. We're just north of San Antonio and Boerne. And limestone is very weak to acid, right? Now in this case, the acid that's affecting the rock is going to be carbonic acid, which is formed when carbon dioxide mixes with water in the atmosphere and obviously falls down in the form of rain. So what that means is, in order for this chemical weathering process to occur, it does need moisture, which of course comes in the form of rain. So acid rain comes down, it'll affect the rock, right? And it will create these kind of marble-sized holes in the limestone that you can see here. Now another interesting thing you can note on this particular rock is examples of biotic weathering or biological weathering. You notice here are kind of some remnants of lichens, right? Or lichens, depending on who you are, but I like to say lichens. So in this case, you can see it is a living thing, right? A living organism that grows on the rock. Now, it weathers the rock slowly, generally causing it to flake off in kind of thin layers by causing an ion exchange. And the lichen is actually able to draw nutrients from the rock through this ion exchange, which is what causes it to flake off. If you look closely kind of down here, obviously it's a little bit hidden by the soil, there is going to be actual small remnants of the rock that is becoming the soil. Now, we did just talk about biological weathering with the lichen, but that's not actually the main source of biological weathering in nature. The main source is going to be tree roots breaking up rocks, and there's a very clear example of that right here. Now, if you'll take a look with me, you'll be able to see very specifically right here the roots and the actual body of the tree itself coming out of the ground and breaking up the rocks right here, right? Now that can break up the rocks pretty effectively, and that can cause, you can see with these small rocks right here, right, mass wasting and erosion of the rocks, right? The rocks are leaving their original spot. They're actually being acted upon by gravity to move downhill, right? And you can see very clear examples of that right here, right? There's going to be plenty of rocks that broke off from the rocks up here, right? Mass wasting occurred, they fell down, and they are going to eventually continue their journey down with gravity, right? That's going to be pretty clearly shown all along this ridge. You can see the different layers in the rock right here, kind of the stratification, right? Take a close look, right? This is sandstone, as discussed before, which is a sedimentary rock. The way it flaked off right here, right? Just very clear examples of different types of weathering all taking place kind of concurrently. This might even be an example of chemical weathering again, right? So just one more way that we can see that nature is affected by living things, right? Rather the way rocks are affected by living things. Now, it's great to talk about the different types of weathering we have, right? Obviously, we'll find some more examples a little bit later. What I want to talk about now is going to be stream processes and how stream processes can affect the landscape and affect the geography of where you're at, all right? If you want to follow me over here, what we're going to see in this area is a very clear example of an ephemeral stream, right? Now, an ephemeral stream is going to be where water flows only when it is raining or directly after a rain, right? Other than those times, it is going to be completely clear of moisture, which, as you can see, it is right now. Now, looking down, you can see that there is some evidence of erosion of the stream, right? There are large rocks here that were carried by the water, but as there is no water right now, they're not going anywhere. Now this ephemeral stream is in direct contrast to another type of stream called a perennial stream, which is what we're going to look at next. Welcome to Cibolo Creek. This right here is a wonderful example of a perennial stream, all right? A perennial stream is going to be one that has moisture in it, or water, all year round, right? Now this continually flows. The level of water in it will raise or lower depending on what season we're in, right? But generally it does always have year-round flowing water, right? That's what makes it a stream. Now there are going to be a few different geological processes we can see with this stream. Let me go ahead and take that from you. Now, one thing to note right off the bat is that this water is actually fairly clear. You can see the bottom very easily. That means that it's not carrying very many dissolved particles in it, right? Notice the flow of water is also fairly slow, and it's not a large volume of water passing through, and that's why all these rocks on the bottom are stationary, right? Were there more water flowing here, we would be able to see evidence of saltation and traction, right? Saltation being the kind of medium to larger size rocks bouncing along the bottom of the riverbed, and attraction would be these large rocks getting pushed along the riverbed. However, in this case, you can see none of these rocks are moving simply because there's not enough of a flow of water. Were there to be a heavy rain further upstream, right, with the water coming down, we would be able to see some of those processes here. As it stands, though, what we can see is that these rocks are very smooth. They're not very like jagged, which means they've most likely been in the water for some time, and they've had time to erode and weather a little bit in order to kind of lose their roughness, right? They get smoothed out against each other. Now let's go downstream a little bit to check out some more geological processes. Now, here is a very clear example of some erosion or weathering taking place in the past, all right? Take on the other side of this stream right here, you can see some very clear examples of rocks that have broken apart and fallen, right? You can actually see up there where there used to be rocks and kind of how they've migrated downhill. This is a pretty much a textbook example of mass wasting, all right? You can see these rock pieces down here are a little bit large to be considered something like talus or scree, but they're still deposited down at the very bottom of a bank where gravity left them, right? Now, most likely, because it's much higher than the water level, this was not something that was caused by any kind of fluvial action, right? Most likely it was mechanical weathering that caused these rocks to break apart and end up where they are, right? Most likely what I believe happened here, as far as mechanical weathering goes, is just going to be the temperature fluctuation that caused the slow expansion and contraction of these rocks, right? Now, over long periods of time, that expansion contraction can cause these rocks to crack, right? Stress fractures, and eventually they'll weaken enough to where the heavy, large part of the rock will break and fall down on its own. Simply because of where we are, it's unlikely that any major freezing action occurred. It's unlikely that there's any major salt formation, but those are possibilities as well. The important thing to note is simply that there are rocks that fell down to show erosion. I want to discuss one more thing related to fluvial processes, and that's going to be a points bar right over here, as contrasted with a cut bank, all right? So what that is, when a river is, or a stream is flowing, it is going to be depositing material and weathering material, right? Generally, the outside curve of a stream is going to be faster. That means it's going to erode more. This is a fairly gentle curve, right? And it's kind of hard to get further down this particular stream. But if you look on this side, this was once the outer edge of the stream flow, meaning that material was removed, which is why the bank on this side is steeper. You can see that it's much closer to 90 degrees than the other side. It had material removed, right? And of course, with gravity, the material was weathered, right? Fell in here, and it was taken away, right? Eroded. On this side, however, you can see the deposition of much smaller material and smaller rocks, right? You obviously can see it's much more horizontal on this side. Being the inside edge of a stream flow, material gets deposited and left behind on this side, right? This is pretty much the process of creating a stream meander, right? Streams will kind of change over time, right, depending on where material is deposited, where material is removed from, and over time, that is what leads to cutoffs, that is what leads to oxbow lakes, and that is what leads to valley widening and deepening. These processes are all things that can change the landscape of a particular area, and within the next 20, 30, 50,000 years, the landscape of this particular Cibolo Creek is going to change drastically based on this stream flow. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, finding out about different geographic processes. Hopefully we'll see you next time on Geography in My Backyard.